In The Godfather, we follow the powerful Don Vito Corleone as he attempts to keep hold over his vast criminal empire. Key elements of his power include sway over civilian population, notably through intimidation, bribery, or favors. Early on, we see that Vito is accepting guests on his daughter's wedding day, and as Tom Hagen tells us, a Sicilian cannot refuse a favor on his daughter's wedding, on the day of his daughter's wedding. Don Corleone demands respect, and as we can see, his demeanor is different with different guests. The baker Nazarene, for example, is grateful and courteous, and the cake he baked for the Don's wedding was no doubt free. As such, Vito is warm towards him, patient and civil. The Undertaker, Amerio Bonasera, on the other hand, is implied to have distanced himself from Don Corleone, fearing that accepting Vito's friendship, pledging his allegiance, would jeopardize his business and reputation, as it would be known he was in bed with the mafia. Don Corleone is cold towards Bonasera, even refusing to help, chastising the man for not having reached out his hand in friendship earlier so his issue would not have gone as far as it did. It's only when the funeral parlor owner humbles himself to the Don that Vito agrees to grant him a favor which, as viewers of the film will know, is later called in when Vito wants Bonasera to do his best to make his dead son Sonny's body as presentable as possible. Bonasera's issue was that his daughter had been assaulted and beaten by two American friends of hers who attempted to violate her. Bonasera tried to go through the correct legal means but was incensed to find that the court released the duo on suspended sentences, even smiling at Bonasera in court. He then decided to go to Don Corleone, asking for justice for the two boys to be killed. Bonasera's meeting with the Don, the first scene of the film, is a stupendous scene which tells us so much about not just the themes of the film itself, but the character of the Don. I love America, the Undertaker tells us, but his story shows the systems that drive the American dream are corrupt. His trust in law and order is misguided, and we immediately see why a respectable citizen might go to a man like Don Corleone, what this man can do for you, which is to acquire justice through nefarious channels. In essence, this scene sums up why the mafia was founded in the first place, for Italians seeking justice they could not get from the government back home. But as the Don says, that is not justice, your daughter is still alive, which speaks to the fact that this is not some bloodthirsty maniac, a horror villain who will do your bidding for the right price. Whatever he is, the Don has ethics, he has a code he lives by. In the book, the Don goes even further, telling Bonasera mockingly and with scorn that American justice has been delivered and the courts have decided, and all that's left for him is to go and visit his daughter in the hospital with some flowers. And though Vito knows the correct thing to do is to turn Bonasera away, he feels compelled to help the man. But Bonasera goes about it all wrong. He has forgotten about the old Sicilian ways. He has insulted his old acquaintance through his distance.
We've known each other many years, but this is the first time you ever came to me for counsel, for help. I can't remember the last time that you invited me to your house for a cup of coffee, even though my wife is godmother to your only child.
Bonasera gives off the vibe of a man who came to the States, but in his attempts to embed himself with the American way of life, he forego many of the ethics of the Sicilian people. But now his attempt to be a model American citizen has come back to bite him. The Don susses him out perfectly.
But let's be frank, you never wanted my friendship. You were afraid to be in my debt. You found paradise in America. You had a good trade, made a good living. Police protected you, and there were courts of law. But you didn't need a friend like me.
And to add insult to injury, after the Don gives Bonasera a lesson in respect, friendship, principles, traditions, and remembering your roots, the Undertaker replies, "How much shall I pay you?" To him, this is just a business transaction. Perhaps he's more American than he realizes. Interestingly, there is a deleted scene from The Godfather, where Bonasera is preparing to meet the Don and he complains to his wife.
Last year they were killing one another. So now what? Your godfather comes to me. Why? They are killing someone so important that they wish to make his body disappear.
Americo.
They could make me an accomplice to their murder. they could send me to prison. And if the other families find out, they will make me the enemy. I curse the day when you and Comare Corleone became friends.
This is just after Tom Hagen calls Bonasera. As you can see, Bonasera assumed that the Corleones wanted him to make a body disappear and feared he could end up in prison, or worse, become an enemy of the other New York families. Which was a nice callback, I think, to the Don's line in the opening scene where he says, "If by some chance an honest man like yourself made enemies, they would become my enemies, and then they would fear you." But it's evident that Bonasera has been living in fear of the day his debt is asked to be repaid. What do you make of the man? Is he commendable for trying to be a respected, hard-working US citizen and businessman? Or was he naive and insulting for distancing himself from the traditions of his people? Was Bonasera ungrateful for complaining about the favor after the Don sorted his problem out? Or was he wise for being wary of getting too close to the Corleones? Let me know in the comments section below, and while you're here, what have I ever done to make you treat me so disrespectfully? Subscribe to the channel. The deleted scene is derived from Mario Puzo's original novel, in which Bonasera, albeit grateful for the revenge enacted by Don Corleone, becomes frightful when he receives the call from Tom Hagen that the Don is coming to his funeral parlor for the return of the favor. Bonasera knew of the five-family war. He'd been having nightmares about Don Corleone and felt sure that he would become an accessory to murder. He would go to jail, his daughter and wife would be disgraced, and his good name dragged through the mud. He then fears for his life when he imagines what the other families will do when they discover he has helped the Corleones. When Bonasera finally sees that Vito has brought the lifeless body of his son, he betrays a rare gasp, and in that moment, perhaps he realized that he and Vito were more alike than he imagined. Two fathers, desperate to keep their children safe. Two men in pain at the suffering of their children. Bonasera had feared the worst, the most powerful and respected of the Dons calling in a favor. But what approached his doorstep was a broken, grieving man, already sick from the shooting, and using, as the book tells us, Bonasera to physically support himself upright. Bonasera initially went to the Don to get justice for his daughter's assault, initially asking for murder. He feared that Vito would call in the favor with something equally criminal, but instead, Vito's thoughts are for his wife, not wanting to see their eldest son's disfigured body. And as Bonasera betrayed a rare weakness in his stoic attitude and professional requirements, his gasp and the way he looked at the body, Vito also betrays a vulnerability, lamenting in this moment, not at his loss of power, his next in line to the throne, his position in the war, but...
Look how they massacred my boy.
Perhaps in that moment, Bonasera felt pity for this great man, and shame on his own part for assuming the worst about the Don, for not taking into account his humanity, that the Don would only have called upon him for a genuine favor, and also a little hint of relief that after all this anxiousness, he was only being asked to do his job. The last time Bonasera is mentioned in the book is him actually being tasked with working on the body of Don Corleone himself. The book tells us, the wake was held in the house of the mole, in the old-fashioned style. Amerigo Bonasera had never done finer work, had discharged all obligations by preparing his old friend and godfather as lovingly as a mother prepares a bride for her wedding. Everyone commented on how not even death itself had been able to erase the nobility and the dignity of the great Don's countenance, and such remarks made Amerigo Bonasera fill with knowing pride, a curious sense of power. Only he knew what a terrible massacre death had perpetrated on the Don's appearance. Speaking of the problem being sorted out, we never actually see what the Don has in store for the two young men. Of course, it won't be anything pretty, but as the Don says, give this job to Clemenza. I want reliable people who aren't going to be carried away. I mean, we're not murderers, in spite of what this Undertaker thinks. Which highlights that Vito has an image of himself and his people. He separates himself from the rabble of thuggery and murderers that are rampant across the city. Both of the boys were in their 20s and had fathers with political connections, which kept the boys out of the military draft. Clemenza, who had paid off the local precinct patrol, had given the job to Paulie Gatto, who goes with two heavies and locates the two men at a bar chatting up women. Paulie gave only one warning to his goons. If those punks get out of the hospital in less than a month, you guys go back to driving trucks. Paulie catches the attention of Bonasera's daughter's attackers as they come out of the bar before Paulie's goons jump the duo and begin beating them to jelly. As the book goes on, they did so with frightening deliberation, as if they had all the time in the world. They did not throw punches in flurries, but in timed, slow-motion sequences that carried the full weight of their massive bodies. Each blow landed with a splat of flesh splitting open. Gatto got a glimpse of Moonan's face. It was unrecognizable. The two men left Moonan lying on the sidewalk and turned their attention to Wagner. Wagner was trying to get to his feet and he started to scream for help. Someone came out of the bar and the two men had to work faster now. They clubbed Wagner to his knees. One of the men took his arm and twisted it, then kicked him in the spine. There was a cracking sound and Wagner's scream of agony brought windows open all along the street. The two men worked very quickly. One of them held Wagner up by using his two hands around Wagner's head like a vice. The other man smashed his huge fist into the fixed target. There were more people coming out of the bar, but none tried to interfere. Paulie Gatto yelled, "Come on, enough!" The two big men jumped into the car and Paulie gunned it away. The two men end up requiring plastic surgery, and if I remember correctly, one of the goons who beat the assaulters is Rocco Lampone, who at the time was Muscle, but eventually replaces Paulie Gatto after Paulie betrays the family, and subsequently Rocco rises through the ranks, building a secret regime for the family and becoming head of security. The other goon, according to Mark Weingartner's novels, The Godfather Returns and The Godfather's Revenge, was Nick Jaracki, who becomes something of the protagonist of the books and a foil to Michael Corleone during his reign. Do you think the visceral beating of the two men should have been included in the film? For sure, I can see why it was not included. We know what's going to happen to them. Plus, from a narrative point of view, if we need something early on in the film to get an idea of what Corleone justice looks like and how dangerous these people are, this is sufficed by the horse's head in the bed scene, which would essentially do the same job as the beating scene. Then again, the series of events could be edited so that we see Bonasera's daughter get justice, which gives us the idea that the Corleones are dangerous, yes, but they are necessary. They are a justice system for those that the American system chews out. But then, during the Tom Hagen storyline in Hollywood ending with the horse in the head, we learn that, they're not as honorable as they make out they are. This is thought to be one of the reasons why a scene which revealed the Hollywood producer was actually a pedo was cut out, as it would have made the Corleone revenge against the producer have a tinge of justice attached to it, which was not the intention of the scene. So essentially the two scenes, the beating and the horse in the head, could be two halves of the coin depicting the duality of the mafia, why they're good to have around and why they're bad to have around. In any case, I'm fine with how it is. Maybe if we knew Bonasera's daughter or saw her beaten, it would be different. But just like how we don't need to see Enzo the Baker's immigrant documents getting filed, we don't need to see the two men getting roughed up. What do you think? Let me know down in the comments section below. Subscribe to the channel and thanks for watching.